Hi everyone and welcome back to the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel with me, Tom Campbell. You can find me on Twitter at utterlytc. And guys, is everyone excited? We've got one more week ahead of game week 1 and I am super excited to say I have got another elite team reveal video coming for you today, and we've got two of our elite managers and they've got their thoughts pulled together ahead of game week 1. So if you do want to hop around, guys, I do have timestamps on the video. And I should also say that if you want to head over to fantasyfootballfix.com, you can get the thoughts of all of our elite managers. We've got over 80 top 10k finishers amongst them. So lots of great thoughts for you to get involved with and get a read on. So without further ado though, guys, let's get on with the video. Guys, welcome back to the channel, and I hope everyone is super excited about game week 1. The hope is still with us, isn't it, guys? We've got just one more week's tinkering to go before we've got game week 1 to look forward to. And in this week's video, I've got the thoughts of Tim and Mark respectively, and to get their thoughts ahead of game week 1 and see how their game week 1 squads are shaping up. We've had some injury news, haven't we, guys, this week? So it's going to be interesting to see how both of these elite managers have reacted to the news. So let's have a little look. We can see straight away that Tim here has got a 3-5-2 formation, which I guess has been pretty consistent for all of our elite managers, hasn't it? Let's see how he's starting off though in goal. And you can see there that he has opted to spend £5 million of his budget on Onana for Man United ahead of their home match against Wolves in game week 1. Now, Onana did get lobbed from fully 50 yards in United's sort of last main pre-season game, and I wonder whether or not that might be a concern to Tim and to other managers as we look ahead to the forthcoming season, with him being more of a sweeper keeper, more of a kind of progressive keeper that we've seen become the sort of fashionable pick now. But Onana is in for Tim. Now, before I reveal the game week 1 back three that he's opted for, I'm sure some of you will have looked onto that bench already and seen that Tim is actually opting to spend 5.5 million on Ben Chilwell, excellent FPL asset over the years, but he's actually only good enough to find his way onto the bench for Tim and substitute one spot there. So who on earth is making this back three and making the rest of the team to keep Ben Chilwell out? Well, let's take a little look at this defence. And you can see here we've got a back three. Now, Pervis Estupiñán in at 5 million for Brighton ahead of the game week 1 fixture home match against Luton, and a lovely first few game weeks fixtures for Brighton. Seems to make sense. You can, guys, check effective ownership stats over at fantasyfootballfix.com, and if you are a user of the FPL Plus plugin on Google Chrome, which is amazing, I would recommend everyone get involved in using that. If you are a browser user, you can also see how those ownership stats play out for each of your players when you look on the game week or the squad selection page, which is absolutely awesome. So I would recommend you take a look at that. But yeah, Pervis Estupiñán in at 5 million seems to make sense. He is owned by almost 50% or around 50% at the time of recording. So super popular pick, and you can completely understand why. We've also got two centre halves here, which is not the norm actually ahead of game week 1. Normally, historically, game week 1 managers and FPL elite managers on Fantasy Football Fix have tended to prefer the fullbacks, but maybe positions are changing subtly. We certainly saw John Stones, who makes his way into Tim's game week 1 team, operating in a slightly different role at the back end of last season in a more midfield type berth. So interesting selection there. We think that John Stones was an incredible pick last season as Man City picked up the treble, wasn't he? So he is the route into the Man City defence of choice for Tim, and he is being supplemented by Gabriel. We know that Arsenal have got great fixtures up front, and of course they have got Nottingham Forest in their opening game in a home fixture. So Gabriel there, we know, is a threat offensively from set pieces and has been good on bonus points historically as well. So Gabriel in at 5 million. Quite interesting to see these elite managers prepared to spend big for their starting game week 1 defensive picks. Again, historically not always been the case, but this is how the game has evolved. So that is the back three of choice for Tim. Let's look at this midfield and see how we are shaping up. Again, we've got to keep in mind that Ben Chilwell is on the bench at the moment. So which 5 midfielders are keeping him sitting on the bench? Well, you can see straight away there, we've got Bruno Fernandes in at 8.5 million. Seems to be a super popular pick, actually, doesn't he? He really does seem to be in a lot of people's thoughts ahead of their game week 1 selection. So he is in for Man United, the second Man United player with Onana in goal. And the double offensive Arsenal coverage of Martinelli and vice-captain Saka. I do wonder whether or not Tim has responded to the news that Gabriel Jesus has had to undergo a minor operation or minor procedure per Mikel Arteta's comments. It's going to keep him out for a few weeks. So Gabriel Jesus is not expected to be, or not going to be part of game week 1. So interesting to see how Tim has responded to that. And we've got Martinelli and Saka respectively taking up the other Arsenal spots in his team. And the 6.5 million double header there, you've got Eze for Crystal Palace. They've got a nice away fixture against the promoted side in Sheffield United. And I put out some stats courtesy of the FPL or the Fantasy Football Fix stats sandbox on my Twitter at UtterlyTC in response to a question earlier this week. And it highlighted that Eze has really been, or last season really was, a minutes monster in terms of being relied upon for selection and actually returned super effectively home and away. So really interesting pick there at 6.5 million. We know that Wilf Zaha has left Crystal Palace, so I wonder whether or not Eze is going to assume that kind of talismanic role in the Crystal Palace midfield there. So an interesting pick there. And he's being partnered by Mbumo of Brentford in at also 6.5 million. So that is how Tim is intending to use his monies in midfield. And having that double 6.5 million contingent there is an interesting one. It's going to be interesting to see how that compares to Mark's in a moment. And we know Mbumo, we've talked about previously, is an interesting and reliable pick in terms of the attacking returns we're expecting in the Brentford team, particularly bearing in mind that Tony is out because of the gambling ban that he picked up. In terms of the forwards, now this is going to be interesting. I've mentioned Jesus is no longer in the reckoning for game week 1. I think we can safely assume we know who the first forward is. But the other one is going to be an interesting selection there. I wonder how many people will have predicted that Darwin Núñez is Tim's selection there. 7.5 million. Tough away fixture against Chelsea in game week 1. But we know that game week 2 in the Bournemouth game is going to be where he comes to roost, you would expect. So whether or not Tim sort of is more of a preparatory pick, but he's certainly been deemed good enough to make into the game week 1 squad and is being preferred to Chilwell. That would make sense as to why you would bench Chilwell. You wouldn't necessarily want your attacker and defender facing off against one another if you can avoid it. So really interesting to see how Tim has decided to respond to the news of Gabriel Jesus being out and how to use that additional money up front to partner Erling Haaland, who of course picks up the captaincy. You can see Tim has got a top 1k finish, beautiful, top 5k, 7 times in the top 5k, which is amazing, and 8 top 10k finishes. I mean, it's a resume to be proud of, so we should bear in mind how his thoughts are playing out ahead of game week 1. Nice to see a bit of West Ham coverage in at game week, at the third substitute, I should say, as well. He did actually play in West Ham's final pre-season game, which play and start, although West Ham were thoroughly beaten 4-0. So this is not a happy hammer that's bringing you this video, but I do like seeing a bit of West Ham coverage, even if it is completely tokenistic and put and hidden away at third choice on the bench. Anyway, that is how Tim has shaped up ahead of Game Week 1, guys. Let us know in those comments how many of those players do you have in your Game Week 1 selection, and how many of these players do you think are going to hit the ground running? I'll be really interested to see what your thoughts are. In any way, though, we want to move on now and take a little look at how Mark is shaping up and compare it to this team to see whether or not formation and personnel are in any way different. So let's move on and take a look at Mark's team. Okay, so probably no surprise, guys, to see another 3-5-2 formation. It does seem to be the in vogue formation of choice for elite managers and for FPL managers at large throughout the FPL community, and it seems to make good sense. So in terms of the goalkeeper, lo and behold, it's also Onana of Man United. So Mark is happy to trust in the new goalkeeper that Erik ten Hag has brought in over the summer. And indeed, if we look through to that back three, goodness me, these elite managers are converging. There seems to be a consistency amongst their picks, doesn't it? These great minds are all starting to arrive at the same sort of thought processes. And again, you can head over to fantasyfootballfix.com and check out those blog thoughts as they play out before and during the season, I should say. So again, that back three of Gabriel, John Stones and Purvis Estupinian respectively. So I did find that interesting. We've got complete consistency and a mirror image of Tim's team and Mark's team in terms of the defenders. When we move on though and take a look at the midfield, there is a divergence here. And you can see that Mark has actually opted for a double Man United offensive coverage rather than the double Arsenal coverage. Mark is actually so confident in Marcus Rashford, he's actually been given the vice captaincy as well, ahead of the more typical choice, I guess, that we've seen with our other elite managers of Saka having that vice captaincy. So Mark is particularly bullish on Man United for game week 1 here, having Bruno Fernandes in at 8.5 million and Marcus Rashford as well in at 9 million with that vice captaincy. Now, we do know that Man United have officially announced the signing of Rasmus Højlund for £72 million from Atalanta, and he will be expected to take that central striker spot once he is fit. There is some report that he has actually got a small injury at the moment, which is going to keep him out of game week 1 and potentially the game week 2 fixture as well. So we need to keep our eye on how long it is before Rasmus Højlund becomes an option in FPL and how that actually impacts where Marcus Rashford will be playing, whether or not he will operate, say, for example, more on the left-hand side of the attacking team or team selection that Erik ten Hag operates. At the moment, you would expect him to operate more centrally. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And look at that, the double 6.5 million selections there in terms of how the money's being spent is actually different. We do have Mbumo for Mark as well, but he's actually supplemented that with Mitoma, who we know had a great season for Brighton last season as well, rather than Eze. So he's doubling up for Brighton assets ahead of that home match against Luton. And Brighton, as we know, have a great early initial run. But I should say as well, if we're talking about the defensive prowess of Ben Chilwell and actually only being good enough for the first bench slot for Tim, look at this. We've actually got Chilwell as bench number 2 option for Mark as well. So ahead of the home match against Liverpool, I should say, for Chelsea, Ben Chilwell is in the squad for Mark, but he's only good enough for the second spot. Tarkowski of Everton is actually preferred. They've got a Fulham game at home in their first game week fixture. So Tarkowski is at the moment operating as that first bench choice, which I did find interesting. Chilwell is deemed good enough for the squad at 5.5 million, but only good enough for the second spot on the bench ahead of that game against Liverpool in game week 1. We know that Chelsea's fixtures do ease dramatically thereafter, and it is a lovely run. So Ben Chilwell in both of these guys' teams as we look ahead to game week 1. Let's look at the forward though. And we just mentioned Chelsea, didn't we? So we've got Erling Haaland there with the captaincy, which we would have all expected. But Nick Jackson has been super impressive for Chelsea in their pre-season games. I believe they have gone unbeaten throughout. And certainly Nick Jackson playing through as number 9 and looking to benefit from the news that Nkunku has picked up a very minor injury, which may keep him out of game week 1. We'll have to keep an eye on Pochettino's press conferences ahead of game week 1. But you know that Jackson has been playing through the middle for Chelsea during their pre-season. He's in at 7 million. I've mentioned the fixtures do ease after that first game. You may not even consider that game week 1 fixture from an attacking perspective for Chelsea is particularly bad. We know how difficult Liverpool found things defensively last season. So Jackson is a really interesting pick. So you've got Mark picking up Jackson as his secondary pick to supplement Erling Haaland, differing from how Tim went about it with his game week 1 selection. So it's really interesting to see how people are choosing to use their money. We know that Ollie Watkins has been favoured as well. So what about you guys' thoughts? How do you think you're going to spend your additional money in relation to the forward lines? We know that Erling Haaland is going to be super highly picked and super highly captained, but in terms of how you're using the additional monies, guys, let us know in the comments which one of these picks do you prefer between our top elite managers here, and how many of the players that these guys have picked do you have as well? Let us know in the comments as well. Guys, that about wraps it up for this video, and I'm so excited to say that we do have football coming again soon ahead of game week 1. So we've only got one more week to wait. So do get those squads locked in ASAP, guys, because before you know it, we're going to be into game week 1 and looking forward, and this will be in the rear view mirror before you know it. Let us know in the comments how your team's shaping up. How many of these players do you share? What are your thoughts of the double 6.5 million midfield selections for Tim and Mark respectively? And do please head over to fantasyfootballfix.com as well, where you can check out the thoughts of our elite managers in the elite section, where you've got over 80 top 10k finishers amongst them. You can also pick up the FPL Plus plugin if you're interested in using Chrome as your browser, there's lots of amazing embedded features within that as well, which is particularly cool as you plan your squad and look ahead to the forthcoming game weeks as well. Do please smash a like on the video as well. Do please subscribe to the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel as we're pushing forward to try and get ourselves to 40,000 subscribers as soon as we possibly can. Got lots of great content still to come from FPL Phillips and from Callum as well as myself, and I'll be bringing the elite managers back to talk to you all once Game Week 1 is in the books. But until then, guys, have a great week. Get those teams locked in. Very best of luck ahead of Game Week 1, and I'll talk to you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.